For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. A short trading week this week because of Good Friday tomorrow. However, the Asian markets are falling. Wall Street slightly worried about a recession in the United States, and that's caused sort of slight downward pressure on the markets. The jobs figures, though, still out tomorrow, which I'll be reporting on. But just to say that as far as trading is concerned, most of the main markets are shut tomorrow. Now, China, Macron, Ursula von der Leyen meeting the Chinese president. What on earth are they doing there? What are they doing? Are they prostrating themselves, or are they bargaining? This is something which is not really known at the moment. Macron went his own way as far as Russia was concerned earlier in the Ukraine conflict. Now he's taking Ursula von der Leyen there. What are they going to discuss? It is a bit of a tightrope, basically, because the EU is strongly aligned with the United States, and as you know, China and Russia are still exploring what their relationship actually is, at least on the face of it. So all to play for. But what are those two doing there, and what are they going to achieve? They're going to talk trade. The EU happens to be a huge trade partner with China, $709 billion worth last year. China is the EU's biggest trading partner, so there is some kind of bargaining space there. As far as the United States is concerned, futures sort of down basically, although relatively little change. They're looking at the jobs market today, which of course is the jobless claims today, and then the big jobs figure tomorrow. And it's felt that the Fed will therefore be looking at this and working out whether or not they need to keep their fight against inflation at the cost possibly of the economy. So the non-farm payrolls absolutely vital tomorrow. UBS, bring you over to Europe. UBS has been meeting its shareholders for the first time since buying Credit Suisse. The shareholders are not impressed necessarily by the company actually doing that. They're worried about legal complications, and they're worried about the cost of it and where it's going to go. How long will the transition period be? They brought back Sergio Amotti, as you know, as I reported last week, to try to do something about this, but it's going to take a long time to merge those two together. It is a UBS takeover, but they will have to merge systems, they'll have to merge data, they'll have Credit Suisse probably expectedly to lose about 20,000 staff, or at least, 20 to 30% of staff, which is still quite a considerable figure. So all that to play for, and the shareholders are not very impressed by that. Let us turn our attention to the United Kingdom, and what the government has done is published its post-Brexit customs deal with the EU. Basically, there's going to be less bureaucracy. They want to reduce the friction. They want to have trusted traders, as they call them, and goods will be ranked on risks to human, animal and plant health and so on. Will it actually reduce the friction? Small business doesn't think so. Small business thinks that the EU and the United Kingdom, because of Brexit, there is increased bureaucracy between the two of them. This is a growing process. We probably can't say too much about it right now, but they are publishing the plans right now. UK Ofcom, the regulator, is looking at Microsoft and Amazon, and it's looking at their dominance of the cloud computing market. Now, Google only has 5 to 10% of that. Between them, the two of them, Microsoft and Amazon, control between 60 and 70% of it. And the UK regulators are worried that they control too much. Now, this is but the latest in a lot of international action against big tech. We've covered it before on this program. This is the latest version of it, and this is about cloud computing. And as far as the UK is concerned, still staying with the CBI, the bosses' lobby group. There are allegations of sexual misconduct, so the government has effectively cut off contact there. What does that mean? Well, no big dinner as far as the CBI is concerned. Tonight, normally the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister, would speak at that, so there's no contact between government and the CBI until the CBI sorted it all out. And they expect to have some sort of results just after Easter, Easter Tuesday, or the beginning of that Easter week, Easter Tuesday, Easter Wednesday. As far as oil's concerned, again, fears about US recession are keeping the price actually down yesterday, although the Saudis have increased their oil prices to Asian buyers. If there's a big driving summer in the United States, and this is always key to where the oil market pump prices go, then that Goldman Sachs target of $100 a barrel seems realistic. If not, then it won't be. That's what the market's saying today. Gold is having a brief timeout. It surges into record territory. It's after 2050 now an ounce. It's probably round about 2,000, but it's vacillating all the time, and it's meeting a lot of resistance on its way up. It all depends on what people feel about risk and feel about recession looming. And as far as crypto is concerned, finally, it's likely that they'll be looking at the banking crisis, because if the banking crisis gets worse, or at least it doesn't resolve itself very quickly, people will turn to crypto, and therefore the value of crypto will probably go up. And just some brief breaking news: ExxonMobil has withdrawn, as far as we report sites, withdrawn from its massive investment in deep sea oil production or deep sea oil drilling off Brazil, and it was felt to be a major growth area for them. That is now no longer taking place, we understand. That is the global view.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for giving us the global view. Just to look at the UK and the plans to lay out trade plans in the next few hours. Just to mention, as to beyond the removal of bureaucracy at the borders, there's a huge impact on trade in the UK following Brexit. And again, this often, as always, brings up the question as to what is the real cost of Brexit on trade, and especially as it impacts small businesses in the UK. And would this initial plan be sufficient to address those issues?
Small businesses say no. They're already saying that the bureaucracy is too much. The trusted trader route is probably quite good. I think of it rather like this: that when you go through customs at an airport, you yourself choose whether you go green or go red. If you go green and you're smuggling stuff, you run the risk of being searched. If you go red and declare, then you go red and declare. I think the trusted trader thing is part of the way in which friction is hoped will be reduced. Also, inspections, which will still be necessary, they still are wherever you go in the world. That may take place away from ports and away from airports, and maybe at the point of delivery, at the initial point of delivery. Those are the kind of things that are probably going to help. But small businesses will always complain about bureaucracy. So, as far as the cost is concerned, it's impossible to say, because it's a moving target right now. I think the way to look at it probably is in a couple of years' time to see what's happened. But it's affecting trade with the EU. But remember that the EU needs trade with the UK as much as vice versa.
Well, you mentioned Macron, French president, and also Ursula von der Leyen being in China. You were saying, oh, what are they doing there? Well, I thought that there is a growing concern in Europe now that it's not in the best interest of Europe to isolate China. Henry Kissinger perhaps also said that much at Davos. So maybe this is in line with that. But they are also hoping that they will use the opportunity to put further pressure on China in terms of its relationship with Russia and, the challenge in Ukraine. But the big question is that as Macron and von der Leyen were going to meet with Xi Jinping, China is protesting about the presence of President Tsai of Taiwan in the U.S. And they're saying that there will be, consequences, there will be sanctions. But what exactly can China do to the U.S.? After all, Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. All they did was military drills. So when they say, oh, there will be a reaction, what kind of reaction can they offer? Then secondly, you talked about gold. Well, gold and silver, the precious metals, seem to be doing well. And over 2,000 per ounce, of gold. So I was going to ask you, what exactly is driving, that 40-year record high, buoyancy with the precious metals. And finally, Yanis Varoufakis, when we talk about the banks, as we did yesterday and as you have done today, wrote an essay saying, let the banks burn. That nobody should worry about stabilizing the banks. The banks, in any case, have a very wrong foundation, and that there are alternative payment systems that the world should focus more on. Of course, you know who Varoufakis is, so those three issues.
Okay, well, if you're referring to the IMF, which has already put out its warnings to the shadow banking system, I mean, I think that's probably quite justified. We don't know where these pockets, this is what they're worried about, the pockets of illiquid assets and the pockets of assets which are directly affected by the inevitable rise in interest rates. That's what worries the IMF. Now, you know what I feel about the IMF. I always feel as though it sees things through a rearview mirror. But let's take what it said. I prefer so far the fact that the 2008 financial crisis, as far as I can make out, and as far as the markets can make out, taught banking a lesson that it needs to have bigger cash cushions, which it has at the moment. I think what worries the IMF and what worries most people who actually look at it is where the shadow banking system actually, this is talking about private banks, this is talking about private equity funds, this is talking about hedge funds. You know the sort of thing. That's where the worry is. Where are these pockets of vulnerability? That's what you've got to search out. Now, you don't have the time to do that. Most journalists don't have. I don't have the time to do that. Should the authorities be looking at it? You bet they should. And if I were the head of the IMF, if I were Kristalina, I'd be saying to my minions, this is what you should be looking at right now. Find out where those pockets are and warn the banks and warn the private equity funds and warn the hedge funds. These are vulnerable to interest rates. What are you doing about it? That's what I'd be doing. That's why these people in the big bucks. I share your mystification about China, Russia, Europe, Macron, von der Leyen. I cannot see why these two are actually in China right now. I don't know what they're going to achieve. Ursula von der Leyen apparently is there at Macron's invitation. Why? Why is she even bothering to go? What is she actually representing there? Why is she going at the behest of France? I simply don't know. I find it ridiculous. That's why my initial question about this was: is this an act of prostration by the EU and France in front of China, because we know what China's ambitions are, or have they got a bargaining chip? I suspect they have not. I don't know. Do you know that? I don't know what the answer. I don't know what the answer to that is. As far as precious metals are concerned, I mean, you don't actually invest in chunks of gold. What you invest in is gold-based instruments, and the only reason that gold in particular is doing well is because people are worried about risk. As far as other precious metals are concerned, that's very much about the EV business and how predictable and how that manages to develop. As we understand it, it depends which country you go to. In the UK, for example, I wouldn't buy an electric car because I don't live in a town, and I tend to take long journeys in the car, and I don't want to be dependent on queuing up behind other, because the infrastructure simply isn't there. Is the infrastructure there in Africa? I doubt it very much indeed. Is it in the United States? Doubt it very much indeed. In Europe? Doubt it very much indeed. So that's why there is a purported rise in those kind of precious metals. Gold, of course, is a very different thing. Gold is what you and I would refer to as a benchmark. And if the price of gold goes up, it means people are worried about risk.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Now for business updates across the African continent. Rotus Odiri is here. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning to all our viewers out there. We're still talking about money. So in case anybody missed it, here's P. Diddy again, one more time.
Everything starts from money. We want to cure diabetes, you need money. You want to affect the wealth gap, you need money. You want to do education, you need anything. You need money. That's it.
Everybody leave. By the way, look at what I found. Look at this Throwback Thursday. 2007, This Day concert. Oh, the man himself, P. Diddy, and the Duke, CON, the This Day concert. This was way back in 2007. That concert was heavy. It was the Kelly Rowland, John Legend, Diddy. It was an incredible concert. Throwback Thursday, just since we're talking Diddy. But no, let's get to the money now. $800 million from the World Bank. You've talked about it extensively. But this matter is still about this whole issue with subsidy palliatives. The argument out there is that you are simply switching one subsidy for another, depending on what it is that you want to cushion and the number of people you want to cushion. Because how long is this cost that you're transferring from one to the other going to be extended? And the question still remains as to whether or not these the fuel subsidies will be removed. It is an incredibly heavy topic. And also there's the matter of the conditional cash transfers that the Minister of Finance talked about. There is still the issue of data, exactly how many people are on the register, who is going to get their hands on the cash transfers, how many people are there, and so on and so forth. There's the whole data issue around that. Mr. Ifeni, I believe it was yesterday, this Vanguard headline, not sure if you guys jumped into it, where the NLC, I think we mentioned this morning, the NLC said that if fuel subsidies are removed, then Nigeria is going to quote unquote light on fire. So there is still resistance from the labor unions to fuel subsidies being removed. So that essentially you're going to see essentially continued pushback from the labor unions. But do the labor unions themselves understand how much money is being spent? Again, the budget provision up until June of this year, 3.36 trillion naira that has been provisioned for this. There are arguments that, okay, maybe you move it partially, maybe you yank it. If you remove it partially, you are still going to be paying for it. I mean, it's like parents that subsidize their child's school fees. If you remove it partially, you're still paying a part of it. So that now has to be provisions for, and that needs to be understood with respect to the fuel subsidies. So the clock is ticking for the president-elect. And again, he has said that he's going to yank it, right? And he also said that regardless of whether there are any protests, he's going to remove it. But with everything that's going on right now, I don't know if the two of you think he's going to remove it or he's going to put it partially or not. The clock is ticking. There's a very interesting cartoon. I don't know if you've seen this cartoon in This Day by Asuko. He writes for Business Day. Look at the president there. It says, Mr. Successor, you must tread carefully or I'll be hearing your screams on Daura. That's when he retires. And you can see the trap that's there. It has fuel subsidy written on it. So this is essentially telling you how tough this decision is. But there's one more thing. When we talk about that, I know I'm talking about both sides here, but there was an observation. I remember we talked about this observation, food supply shocks in Nigeria, that the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, observed during the last MPC meeting where they hiked the benchmark rate to 18%. He talked about how food inflation continues to remain stubbornly high in Nigeria. Look at it in the first one, increase in road transportation costs. Then he talks about security issues in food producing areas and then legacy infrastructure challenges. That point number one there, if fuel subsidies are removed, you are going to see that spike and it is going to be, but what must be done has to be done, right? So that's where we are. Yeah, that is our update.
Well, Rotus, I want to say thank you very much for being honest about the information, because that's one of the things I talked about earlier, that we must manage information very carefully and be honest with the Nigerian people. I know there is a push for the removal of subsidy. It is, we're bound by the PIA 18 months post that June 2023, it has to go. And so I had mentioned as to some lessons that we could learn from other African countries. And one thing that a Zambian analyst had done following the removal of subsidy in their own country was that there were 3 hallmarks for successfully removing it. One of which is government intervention. I understand you saying that it is subsidy replacing subsidy, but the truth is that you have to face the reality of the Nigerian people. Yeah. It's going to be hard-hitting in the first few months, perhaps first few years of the removal of subsidy. As you just highlighted, beyond just the price of pump petrol, is also the consequent effect on the price of food. The most vulnerable people are going to be affected. They need some form of safety net. They need some of cushion for the effect. The second aspect of that is that beyond the subsidy cushion, the $800 million is coming from the World Bank. So far, the Nigerian government hasn't talked about a match funding as they did previously with other interventions by the World Bank. So we don't know how much that would cost. But even if they're going to spend money on cushioning, the argument for that is that it will not be anywhere near what you're spending on fuel subsidy, which Ms. Zainab Ahmed has said was 250 billion per month. That was what was budgeted for it. So the amount of money you'll be spending to cushion the effect would not be anywhere near it. And then it is also time bound. It wouldn't be just there as unsustainable as the fuel subsidy was. So that's an argument for that, and to say that definitely to still push for that. But also just to again point out and emphasize, because this is something that we often complain about, transparency. You asked about who are the people on this national register. We don't know who, we don't know the numbers. This also came up during COVID palliative issues. We need to understand this, and the Nigerian government needs to be more transparent with its people.
Well, the major issue with policy in Nigeria is how do you implement policy and build trust and build confidence. Part of the problem we have here is that Nigerians don't trust their government. They don't have much confidence in how policies are implemented. So even when the economists tell us that the subsidy regime is unsustainable, the people are bound to be skeptical. You have cited the example of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the TUC, Trade Union Congress, saying, look, there will be problems, there will be crisis if subsidy is removed. But the main point that organized labor is making is that rather than talk about subsidy removal, why don't you talk about production? Now, what labor needs to be reminded of is that even when you fix the refining end, the production end, it doesn't mean that the cost will necessarily come down.
Exactly.
After all, everybody has been saying, oh, Dangote refinery, once it comes on stream, we will have more than enough fuel. Where the Dangote refinery, the Dangote group is not an arm of government. It's not going to sell at a subsidized rate.
Thank you.
So even within organized labor, there are groups that support this idea. Take a moment, the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria. They say they have no objection to fuel subsidy removal because it makes economic sense. The same position is upheld by the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN. But they too have their own expectations. They're saying, for example, can you do something about the forex regime? So that you break the monopoly in terms of the importation. Because even if you fix the production end, there will still be shortfall in terms of supply. Okay, so who is going to go and import at a black market rate? So these are some of the dimensions of the matter. The second issue, which I did not address earlier, is the Minister of Finance saying, oh, we will still need more revenue. Beyond the $800 million coming from the World Bank. It's not as if it's a donation. It's not charity. Okay, so, and that's probably where you are coming from, talking about introducing more subsidy to address the removal of subsidy.
That's it.
Now, the issue is, where is that revenue going to come from? We've been hearing things about, tax.
Your favorite topic.
There will be more taxation. So you remove subsidy, you punish us. You provide palliatives, you remove the gain from palliatives. This is a major challenge.
It is.
And the next administration will have to address it. I repeat again, the Buhari administration decided to slow down the matter because of President Buhari talking about consequences, social cost, economic cost. Would the Tinubu administration have the courage to just do it immediately? Because leadership is also about courage.
Yes, it is.
And if you get into government, if you don't act swiftly, and you allow it to, we'll be back to square one.
Exactly.
So the question is, will the next government be courageous enough to do what it needs to do, and to ensure that there is enough capacity to make sure that Nigerians are not punished? Because all of this is due to failure of leadership, all of this is due to failure of vision, all of this is due to the politicization of the policy process in Nigeria. as is not the case in countries that have made progress.
Tough decision ahead. We'll see June 30th.
Well, thank you very much, Rutus.